So we have here Maguire from the Clean Fund, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here in Poland. And I know that you have close ties as an organization with Poland, which I could read about, and you probably could say just a word like how you supported the smoke alarm in Poland, because that's one of the initiatives that you did. If there are any others.
Yeah, so we support a number of organizations here in Poland to help Poland achieve a better air quality. We support civil society, and we work closely with the government and with city and local authorities to help them understand the extent of the air pollution challenge that Poland faces and work with them to find solutions for that.
Perfect. As we mentioned before the conversation started, I'm really interested in what challenges there are for the low emission zones in large cities. And normally the message is it's only success. Are there any challenges that you see that still need to be overcome for the low emission zones to be a success?
Yeah, so we're talking now about the larger cities, and we're talking about a problem of air pollution, persistent and in some cases rising levels of air pollution associated with transport. It's bad for people's health, it's bad for overall well-being in a city, and it's bad economically as people get sick, they can't go to work, it's bad for productivity, and it's bad for general desirability as a place to live. So in the end, places that have high air pollution, that deters investment. So everyone, agrees that air pollution is a bad thing. It needs to be reduced. So what are the right ways of doing that? One of the solutions that have been tried, and it works, is low emission zones, or, as we prefer to call them, clean air zones.
Because I like that name.
Clean air zones is a much better term for it, because it really gets to the heart of the issue. If you clean up the air, people's health improves. These cities become much nicer places to live. Now there are challenges, because people are fond of their cars, and not everyone can afford a new car. Not everyone can afford, the latest models. So you need to explain why a clean air zone is necessary, and you need to build support for the idea of it, and you need to sort of start with smaller measures around greening the city and communicating and community engagement until you can build some support around the idea of that this is a necessary policy to improve lives in the city. So I think the wrong way to go about it is just to say, right, well, technocratically, this is what is required. Here we go. We have to do it.
Right.
Thinking of it as an imposition will get people's back up and make people annoyed. You really need to try and start with, a community engagement exercise, build some sort of consensus, build support. You'll not win everybody over. You never will. But if you can get, community groups on, civil society on board, you stand a much better chance of being able to introduce a policy that will stick and which will achieve its desired outcomes.
Perfect. I share the feeling that, it's not so much about the challenges. The only challenge is communicating it well to a large extent, because we have all the benefits of the zones, but unfortunately we have to make some sacrifices. And
there will be some people for whom it will represent a financial burden.
Yeah.
So are there some schemes where you can subsidize the scrappage of older vehicles, for instance? So for less wealthy communities, can you have special measures that address their needs? And there may be people with mobility issues who rely on their vehicle and don't have a lot of disposable cash. So special consideration for that group. So there are different ways in which you can address the specific points of disadvantage that a zone might exacerbate. So I think that those are important introductory measures to soften the pain, if you like, in particular areas.
Perfect. As I mentioned before, I come from a small town. I'm a small town guy, and I always see that there is a lot of focus on the large cities. It's much more difficult to attract this attention to reducing smoke, not just transport, but also low emissions smoke from homes, from burning fossil fuels. Is there any advice you could offer to a small town, like how we can cope with the challenges of the smog and the emissions?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to do in everywhere is to really understand what's the dominant source of emissions. There's no point introducing a transport policy if actually the problem is emissions from household heating. So really understanding what's the predominant source, and then considering what's the right policy response to that. In a number of small towns, one can imagine that they would be very connected to the rural neighbourhoods around them, and a lot of people would be coming in and out of town to do business and perhaps for education or leisure. So, introducing a low emission zone might not be the right response in a place like that. So you might want to look at investing in more public transport, or in some sort of urban design responses that perhaps slow down traffic or move traffic out of the city centre in some way. Because low emission zones, they'll not be the answer everywhere. So it's really about understanding what the source is, and then looking, what's the smart solution to the problem you face, and considering all the options you have.
That makes sense. Okay, I work on that for sure in my town. Looking at Europe in general, do you see the differences in how people welcome the low emission zones? Is it consistently like the resistance that you talked about before that has to be overcome, or other places where it is welcome without any obstacles, without any reservations?
Well, I think there will always be some reservations in some place, there'll always be some person who's mildly inconvenienced. If I look at London, the introduction of the first low emission zone in the centre of the city passed really quite easily, and was generally accepted. I think there had a lot of time and effort had gone into educating Londoners to the dangers that air pollution represented. So there was a sense in which people understood it made sense to limit older and dirtier vehicles from passing down the streets that people lived on. So I think there was relatively little objection to the introduction of the first zone back in 2019, if I remember rightly. And in other parts of Europe, other cities around Europe, there are different types of zones have been introduced, and the more education that takes place, the more awareness raising that takes place, the more prior community engagement that you undertake, the more building of consensus and engagement with civil society, the more you use health professionals to get the message out that clean air is really bad for your health. That's why kids have asthma. That's why they have to stay at home on dirty air days. The more you do that, the more people accept clean air zones as a solution and reap the benefits.
So there's work for us too, as journalists, to do the work and communicate it well. So coming from Europe to Poland, like just a short overview, because you must have been watching Poland change slowly in the right direction. Do you see hope for us?
So I see that a conversation has begun around Poland's urban air pollution problem. What do we do that? It's a conversation that's been going on in places like Krakow for quite some time, and in Warsaw now, it's quite a lively discussion. So again, the important things are, what are the main sources of air pollution? Is it traffic? Is it older vehicles? Then what are the possible solutions? And really, it's important that Poles, get to know the extent of the air pollution problem, get to know the extent of the health challenge that and the health burden that imposes upon them. And then, the city authorities need to sort of try to bring people with them and say, look, we all have a problem. We all want this city to be livable. We want this city to be a healthy city. What can we do about it? And one option is some sort of low emission zone or clean air zone. shall we go down that? Shall we go down that route? Because I think responsible city leaders are not going to be happy just leaving a problem to get worse and worse and worse. And air pollution is getting worse. So as responsible city leaders, they need to do something. They need to address this, but you also need to bring the community with you. So I think that it sounds to me like that's where Poland is at the moment in the big cities. We know there's a problem. We need to bring communities with us and agree what the right response is.
I do hope that our city leaders will live up to what you're saying, and thank you so much. It's fantastic to have you here. I hope you enjoy the Congress, of course.
Thanks very much. My pleasure.
So much. Thank you.